The cabin of the private Gulfstream G650 was quiet, bathed in the soft blue glow of the lead strip lighting. It was 2:17 a.m., somewhere over the vast, dark expanse of the Rocky Mountains. Most of the passengers were asleep, wrapped in cashmere blankets, oblivious of the fact that they were cruising at 45,000 feet. In the back, 12-year-old Leo sat awake, his face illuminated by the screen of his tablet. He wasn't playing a game. He was studying a complex flight manual for a FighterJet simulation. Leo was small for his age, with messy brown hair and glasses that slid down his nose, but his mind was sharp, filled with avionics data and engine specs. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching. Suddenly, the smooth hum of the jet was interrupted by a violent shudder. It felt as if a giant hand had grabbed the fuselage and shaken it. Leo gripped his armrests as the plane lurched downward. Then, the most terrifying sound in aviation filled the cabin. Silence. The deep, powerful roar of the twin Rolls-Royce engines sputtered and died, leaving only the rushing sound of wind against the glass. The cabin lights flickered and went out, replaced by the dim, eerie red of the emergency lighting. Up front, the heavy door to the cockpit banged open, unlatched by the violent turbulence. Leo unbuckled his seatbelt and scrambled toward the front, ignoring the cries of the few other passengers waking up in terror. He looked into the cockpit and froze. The scene was a nightmare. The captain was slumped over the center console, unconscious, a trickle of blood running down his temple where he had struck the overhead panel during the jolt. The co-pilot, a young man named Rick, was clutching his chest, his face pale and sweating profusely. He was gasping for air, his eyes wide with panic. I can't breathe, Rick wheezed, his hand shaking as he reached for the radio. The plane was drifting, its nose slowly tipping forward into a dive. Leo didn't think. He reacted. He had spent thousands of hours in simulators, taught by his father, a former AirForce ace who had passed away 2 years ago. Leo squeezed into the jump seat behind the pilots. He looked at the digital displays. They were a Christmas tree of red warning lights. Both engines had flamed out due to a catastrophic fuel system error caused by the turbulence. The plane was now a 60,000-pound glider, falling out of the sky at 3,000 feet per minute. Rick tried to key the microphone, but he slumped back, overcome by a panic attack or a medical event, dropping the headset. Leo grabbed the headset and pulled it over his ears. He looked at the altimeter. They were passing 38,000 feet. He pressed the push-to-talk switch on the yoke. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Leo's voice was high-pitched, trembling but clear. This is November 60 Alpha. Both engines are out. Pilot is unconscious. Co-pilot is incapacitated. We are falling. 300 miles away, inside the Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center, the room fell silent. Mark, a veteran controller with 20 years of experience, adjusted his earpiece. He frowned, looking at the blip on his radar that was descending rapidly. November 60 Alpha. This is Denver Center, Mark said, his voice calm and professional. I copy your mayday. Say souls on board and state pilot qualifications. You sound young. 6 souls on board, Leo replied, his eyes scanning the airspeed indicator. I am 12 years old. I am not a pilot, but I know how to fly. Mark exchanged a horrified look with his supervisor. A child was flying a complex business jet over the jagged peaks of the Rockies in the dead of night. Okay, son, Mark said, leaning closer to the screen. What is your name? I need you to stay calm. We're going to get you down. Leo took a deep breath. He looked at the dark windshield. He felt small and terrified, but then he remembered his dad's voice. Focus on the instruments, Leo. Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. My name is Leo, he whispered. Then he steeled himself. But my call sign is Raptor. Copy that, Raptor, Mark said, accepting the handle immediately. He knew that if the kid wanted to be a fighter pilot right now, he would let him. It might be the only thing keeping him from freezing up. All right, Raptor, we need to try an air restart. Do you know where the ignition switches are? Yes, Leo said, his hands flying across the overhead panel. I see them, but the core rotation speed is too low. We don't have enough airflow. I have to dive. Mark's heart skipped a beat. The kid knew the physics. To start a jet engine in midair, without the starter motor, you had to dive the plane to force air through the turbines, like push-starting a car. But diving at night over mountains was suicide for an amateur. Raptor, that is risky. The terrain below you is 14,000 feet. If you dive too steep, you might not pull out. We are at 30,000 feet, Leo said, watching the numbers unwind. If I don't start them now, we crash anyway. Initiating dive. Leo pushed the heavy yoke forward. The nose of the jet dropped. The sound of the wind grew from a hiss to a roar. The speed tape on the display shot up. 200 knots. 250. 300. The mountains were invisible in the dark below, waiting like jagged teeth. Watch your speed, Raptor. Mark warned. Don't overstress the airframe. N2 is rising. Leo shouted over the wind. 12%. 15%. Introducing fuel. He flipped the fuel control switches to run and hit the ignition. Nothing happened. The engine temperature gauges remained cold. The plane was screaming toward the earth. 20,000 feet. No light off, Leo cried out, his voice cracking. They aren't starting. I'm barely getting any rotation. Level off, Mark shouted. Raptor, pull up. You're getting too low. Leo pulled back on the yoke with all his strength. The G-force slammed him into the seat. His vision blurred for a second. The plane groaned, the wings flexing under the strain as he arrested the dive at 17,000 feet. The jagged peaks were close now. The terrain awareness system began to scream. Terrain, pull up. Terrain, pull up. Silence. Leo yelled at the computer, hitting the warning inhibit button. He was breathing hard. The restart had failed. They were low, slow, and silent. Raptor. Mark's voice was softer now, filled with a terrible sadness. He thought this was the end. I see an airport about 20 miles at your 10 o'clock. Aspen. But the mountains are in the way. You might not have a glide ratio. Leo looked at the battery display. The main batteries were draining fast. Once they died, the screens would go black, and he would be flying blind. He looked at the APU, the auxiliary power unit. It was a small turbine in the tail used to generate power on the ground. Controller, Leo said, I'm going to try the APU to power the starter. It's my last chance. The APU isn't rated for start above 20,000 feet, Mark advised, but you are at 16 now. Try it. You have nothing to lose. Leo reached up and flipped the APU master switch. He held his breath. A green light flickered. Then a low whine began to vibrate through the airframe. The APU was spinning up. APU is online. Leo shouted. Bleed air is available. Use it to crank engine number 2, Mark commanded. Focus on the right engine. Leo engaged the starter for the right engine. The plane shuddered. The RPM gauge began to climb slowly. 10%, 20%. Leo introduced fuel again. He prayed, Come on, Dad. Help me. Whoosh. A spike of temperature on the gauge. A roar. The right engine lit up, shooting a flame out the back before settling into a steady, powerful hum. The cockpit lights flickered back to full brightness. The generator kicked in. Engine 2 is running. Leo screamed, tears streaming down his face. I have power. Great job, Raptor. Mark cheered, his voice breaking with relief. Now, add power slowly. Climb to 20,000. Get away from those rocks. Leo pushed the throttle forward. The asymmetric thrust tried to turn the plane, but Leo countered with a rudder, just like in the simulator. The jet climbed, clawing its way away from the deadly peaks. The crisis wasn't over, though. He still had to land a wounded jet with one engine and an unconscious crew. I'm guiding you to Denver International, Mark said. The runways are huge. Emergency crews are rolling. Can you hold her steady? I think so, Leo said, wiping his eyes. But I don't know how to lower the landing gear manually if the hydraulics are messed up. We will walk you through it, Mark promised. You're doing great, Raptor. Just keep flying the plane. For the next 45 minutes, the 12-year-old boy flew the multi-million-dollar jet through the night sky. Mark talked him through every turn, every descent, keeping his voice hypnotic and calm. When the lights of the city appeared, they looked like a sea of diamonds. Leo lined up with the runway. It looked impossibly narrow. "Speed checks," Leo whispered to himself. "Flaps 20. He moved a lever. The plane ballooned up, and he pushed the nose down. "You are a little high," Mark said. "Reduce power to idle. Let her settle." Leo cut the power. The ground rushed up. The runway lights flashed by. He pulled back on the yoke to flare, just as he had practiced 1,000 times in his bedroom. The rear wheels touched the concrete with a screech. The plane bounced once, then settled. Leo slammed on the brakes. The jet skidded, drifting slightly to the left, but he corrected it. It slowed down. 50 knots. 30 knots. Stop. The Gulfstream came to a halt in the middle of the runway, surrounded by flashing red and blue lights of fire trucks. Leo sat in the pilot's seat, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't let go of the yoke. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't scary. It was the silence of survival. The cockpit door opened from the outside. Firefighters rushed in, tending to the captain and Rick. A tall man in a high-visibility vest climbed up the stairs and looked at the small boy sitting in the captain's chair, wearing a headset that was too big for him. "Are you the pilot?" the man asked, stunned. Leo took off the headset. He looked at the man, then down at his trembling hands. "No," Leo whispered. "I'm just a kid." Mark came over the radio one last time, his voice thick with emotion. "Negative on that. You aren't just a kid. Nice flying, Raptor. Welcome to the ground." Leo looked out the window at the stars one last time. He touched the side of the instrument panel. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the cooling engine, he felt like he heard a response. "Roger that. Raptor.